work was released in late fall of 2022, and her forthcoming book, Einstein Never Used Flashcards, and this is the redux for the screen-infused world, will be released in January 2026. Before we get started, a few items to mention. Most of these podcasts, including today's, include an accompanying course on SpeechTherapyPD that is available for 0.1 ASHA CEUs. And just a couple necessary disclosures. We each receive compensation from SpeechTherapyPD, and we'll be discussing Kathy's forthcoming book, which is, again, Einstein Never Used Flashcards. So without further ado, Kathy, welcome to Beyond Words. How are you doing?
I am doing great. The only thing I want to tell you is that my real qualification is that I had three sons and I now have three grandkids. And so they're the love of my life. And if you do that right, then everything else falls by the side.
That's the important stuff, definitely.
That's the important stuff. Yeah.
Is that was that something that got you interested in language, looking at kids, or was I'm always interested in origin stories. So I'm just wondering how you got interested in this field.
No, I'll tell you. First of all, Garrett, I'm so happy to be here. But there are a couple origin stories. I think I was interested in this stuff when I was 13. And I used to go to the swimming pool and I would listen to kids who were like little teeny things, right? 3 and 4 year olds. And they had such sophisticated language, kind of blew you away. Like, I just jumped into the pool. I wonder if mommy is looking. Like, what is that about? And how do they learn to be so sophisticated before they can even tie their shoes? So I thought that was kind of amazing. But I really got interested in language when I was in college. And I was debating, kind of like you here, whether I was going to be a music major or whether I was going to be a psychologist, and I couldn't make up my mind. And I played flute, not so great, but I played flute, guitar, a little bit of piano. And I thought, this is what I want to do. I want to be a composer. And then I learned about this field called the psychology of language. And I thought, my God, music is a language to me. And they kind of seem like they function in somewhat similar ways. So that's how I really decided on language. I thought, ooh, I'm going to study the psychology of music. But there wasn't one. So I went into the psychology of language.
That's amazing. It blows my mind how many people I meet that start in music actually, and
Yeah,
then are
yeah,
interested in language. It just seems like there's some really deep connection there, and we've talked about that a bit on the podcast. But I love that,
yeah.
and you were actually one of the first um, ever to make this connection using music and language, and start to study that in a systematic way. Um,
I sure tried, but as I said, there was literally nobody to be my advisor. And they were doing, I don't know if I should say this, really dumb stuff, like minor keys make you sad. And, if you're in a major key, it makes you happy. But there was some really interesting stuff that came up. Do you remember Ray Jackendoff?
yeah,
He did studied semantics, and Ray is like a very accomplished musician. So I was like gobbling
interesting.
that stuff down. There was a little bit, believe it or not, I remember an old book by Leonard Bernstein who mentioned the connection as well. So it wasn't a field yet, but I must admit I was pretty enticed by it.
That's very cool. Um, I do want to talk more about music stuff. Maybe we'll get into that later.
Sure,
I
sure.
know today is about AI and just new technology
Oh
coming out.
gosh.
But
Yeah.
before we get into the spicy stuff, I
Yeah.
kind of
Okay.
wanted to ask you about just this very simple thing about language input. So I
Mhm.
think most of us are pretty familiar with the Hart and Risley, the 30 million
Right.
word gap,
Right, right.
and the idea that language input is important. But you have this paper on the importance of language input quality.
Hmm,
And specifically, you show that quality predicts language outcomes better than just quantity. And I was wondering if you could talk a bit about what you mean by quality.
No, absolutely. I think what we realized early on is that if you just had masses amount of language coming at you in monologues, young children were just not going to learn that well. One of the places that I first saw this finding was really interesting. A woman named Jacqueline Sachs did a study on deaf kids. So they were, I'm sorry, hearing kids of deaf parents.
Mm,
And it makes a lot of sense that you'd put these kids in front of a television, right? Then they get all this language streaming at them. Wouldn't it make them amazingly conversational? And the answer was no, it didn't. So what's that about? So it isn't just amount, and I say just amount. Amount matters. Obviously, you can't have conversations if you don't have amount. But what we've learned since then, I'll use a fancy term here, is that it's all about contingency. All right, so what's contingency? Like I speak to you, you speak back to me, I speak back to you, and if I wait too long, in the
Oh, I'm
minute,
starting to feel nervous.
you thought my sound was going off. But that's the point, isn't it? The
Mm,
point is if we break it and the timing doesn't work, then it turns out it's not really as conversational. Now, I spent my last week with a 9-week-old baby, and you would think that 9-week-old babies could not have language contingency. But let me tell you, the 9-week-old, not month-old, week-old, would go, "Ka," and I would go, "Goo." And then you leave the space, "Ka," and then you respond back, "Oh." And we had a conversation. Now, I
amazing.
know that sounds bizarre to your audience, but you guys are all in speech therapy, so you get it. That fundamental attention to the timing, the semantic meaning, and the emotional quality, they kind of band together. And Kathy Temis Lamonda was the first to say, if you yoke these things together, the timing, the meaning, the emotional quality, that helps, believe it or not, to build little brain structure. And it helps to build attention and it helps to build brain connectivity. Oh my gosh. So quality comes in the form of conversations and the back and forth conversations. And I think today we would all say that that quality is as important, it's related to, but as important, if not more important, than the quantity.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. It feels like, you know, I think about the TV programs that come on. One little pet peeve sometimes is that, like, someone will on the TV, even if it's directed at kids, they'll leave a space,
Right.
and then after they wait, it's like, "Oh, great job, you did it." But you have no idea whether or not that kid actually responded. So you're kind
Exactly.
of creating these
Exactly.
like false
Super weird.
contingencies there.
It's super
Yeah.
weird. But I'll tell you another place where you really see it. When you call up, for Amtrak, they have this Julie. She's not real, she's just a bot.
Mm.
And I will tell you, when I get the bots and they don't respond in the right amount of time, you like want to yell at them. You want to say, don't you get that your timing is off? I bet you've all felt that when you get these bots on the other end and they tell you they can help you. By the third time I've gone through a bot, I'm screaming at the bot, please get me a human. And then I can
Yeah.
have a real conversation.
Wow. Yeah. Oh, it's making me think of so many things that we must be learning subconsciously. We
Yeah,
have this like so much actual structure that we expect that we never talk about. It's like this invisible scaffolding between humans when we connect. And we definitely, that gets thrown out of the conversation completely when we just talk about input.
no,
Um,
it really does. And I think it's really kind of tragic because there's so much more to those interactions. If you watch people in interaction, there's the touch component, there's the sound of the voice component, there's the level of the sound in the component. All of this stuff is going on at once. And and really, we're keeping the kid in the game. Like that 9-month-old
yeah.
or 9-month-old, 9-week-old didn't take her eyes off my eyes
Mm.
because I continued the conversation. She had
Wow.
plenty of places to wander, but she didn't, which means you're also helping them regulate attention, not just learn the foundations for language.
Amazing. Yeah, you
Mm,
have this really amazing finding as well, or you talk about this idea that it's not even just good parenting. You controlled for
right,
like good
right,
parents in this study. So,
right,
there
right.
can be a parent who's like really, really they're in tune and they just every time the child talks, maybe they're trying to do something for them or talking at them a lot. But this is actually a specific type of skill. It seems like you need to actually be in tune with these contingencies, like you're talking about
I think
the
that's right.
yeah,
That's what makes it, it's not unlike what you did in jazz. You know, you can't just come in anywhere because
yeah,
when you do, you blow the arc of the whole performance. So how do you do it in a way that you kind of know the rhythm and you're making that temporally work? And what we look for are things like fluidity. And it turned out that the fluidity of the conversation predicted a tremendous amount. Now, Hart and Risley do an interesting thing. I mean, their study's not so good, as you know, and it's been criticized up the wazoo, but we all remember the word gap. So, one of the things they mentioned, though, is that there was a gap that occurred between social class. So, if you happen to be, I hate their titles so much, welfare, working, or whatever, that's not what matters. Okay, let's just say that again. That's not what matters. One of my wonderful graduate students, Lillian Masick, who is now a professor in her own right in Illinois, she found that if you look within socioeconomic level, okay, what you find is the parents who have more fluid, connected speech have kids who have more language and more words later on. So you can look at this at 18 months, at 2 years, and you can predict their language out to 3 years of age. That's incredible.
yeah. Wow. Yeah. And I want to highlight this piece, fluency and connectedness, because, um, one thing that seems to be, and this is sort of tying it into devices, one thing that seems to be interfering with that fluency and connectedness is
Mhm.
just kind of the widespread, ubiquitous nature of smartphones and
Oh,
tablets, and just
yes.
all the time I'm getting notifications, and it kind of throws me off what I'm doing. So yeah, what do you think about that? Do you have any
Well, I mean, there's actually research on it, I think we did the first study on it where we were really interested in what happened when people were on parents were on their cell phone or answered a call in the middle of a conversation with their kid. So what we had them do is they're having this lovely conversation with us. We told them we were going to call them. We instructed them to pick up the phone because we wanted to see what happened to the kid. All right. We can probably predict what happened to the kid. The minute that fluent connected back and forth, I call it the conversational duet, and Jack Shonkoff calls it the serve and return. The minute that's broken, the kids are like lost and go do something else. In fact, in one video, I can't even believe we got this. We had a baby doll, and the mom had a baby doll, and then she picked up the phone and she starts talking to whoever is on the phone. And by God, the kid like tried to get mom's attention once, tried to get mom's attention twice, and then started clobbering the baby doll.
wow.
And after that study, I still remember we were invited to be on 2020. And the lady at 2020 said, "Do you honest to God think this is going to happen when we film it?" And I said, I'm pretty sure of it. Basic human behavior. So they had the cameras there. We had a kid, didn't know what we were doing, and the mom picked up the phone, and the kid looked around, tried to get mom's attention, tried to get mom's attention, and walked out the door.
Wow.
I mean, powerful, right? So they notice when you're not looking in their eyes, when you're not responding. And we think that we can kind of just sneak in a little text here. Like I'm just looking at what that little, memo was, what the little notification was. And it's interesting, in a subsequent study with adults, um, I had um, I had adults watching a video, okay? And the video was of four people in a meeting. Okay, just four people in a meeting. One of the people in the meeting just took a glance at her cell phone and then put it down. And we rotated who that person was. And then we asked the people, who do you trust more of these four people? And who would you want as your friend? Well, guess what? Whoppingly, they decided to ditch out of having a friendship with the person who looked at their cell phone.
Wow.
No trust. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. It's funny because I wouldn't even, it was probably subconscious too, when they did they talk about why? Did they even know that
They
that
didn't
was
even
why?
know. I mean, they didn't
Yeah.
even notice. But you break the conversation, and it's so powerful. You break the engagement. And you're right. It's not just people breaking the engagement. I mean, things break the engagement, like dings and dongs. A recent study came out just last week, I think it was, and it was on reading ebooks. Okay. And what came through as better? Well, we've done a lot of work on ebooks versus what I call traditional books. And it turns out that when parents are reading traditional books to kids, for one, they go beyond the cover of the book, which I think is cool. You don't stick just to the words there. So you start a conversation. Books are platforms for conversation.
Yeah.
But the second thing is we looked at physiological measures and there was more bonding between the parent and the child. So that's incredible. But in the study that came out like a couple weeks ago, they asked whether the dings and the boings actually helped, and it turned out completely distracted the kids from the conversation.
So interesting. Wow.
Yeah,
I was just thinking about this topic of ebooks too, because, a lot of they get, recommended all the time. Oh, why don't you get this? It's this great ebook, and like they're talking, and the kids are going to be super engaged. And one is this issue of the talking, which prevents the conversation from happening.
right,
And
right.
then there's also this, I was thinking about this idea of like there's less degrees of freedom in that, like when you go through an ebook, it just
Yes,
like kind of pushes you into a path. Like you have to follow the same
that's
thing every
right.
time.
That's right.
With a book, with a physical book, you have, the world is your oyster. You could do anything with it.
That's right.
Um, it's more
And think of the
creative.
vocabulary. I mean, the vocabulary you can get. Like you're reading Curious George, why not discuss the last time you were at the zoo? So I think we have to be really, really careful. We say to parents all the time, read, talk, sing. And I think and I love that. I love, love, love it. You know, the other half of me says, wow, what are we telling parents? One day one of my friends found a mom that was literally reading the Bible to her kid in the laundromat. And she walked up to her and said, what are you doing to your 3-year-old? And she said, I'm reading the Bible. Why are you reading the Bible? Because everybody in the speech and language field told me I have to read to my kid. Oh, nobody said it should be a conversation.
Yeah,
Whoops.
right. Right, right. Yeah, there's
Yeah,
definitely the zone of proximal development that you have to
yeah,
consider.
yeah.
Um, yeah, probably can just read Shakespeare to a kid, or I don't know, maybe.
Not
But
gonna happen, not gonna
yeah.
happen. I think you're much better off reading about dinosaurs and trucks and, all the things that connect them to the world out there. And also, I have to say, kids learn a lot from fantasy. The work that's coming out in fantasy suggests that it allows them to imagine a world that is not. And
Mm,
what a powerful, powerful thing it is to imagine worlds that aren't, and to think of the words that you can talk about. Because one of the things we've learned a lot about is that to learn vocab, it's not about a list. It's not about memorizing and spit back. Of course, we all know that. We all know that from the SATs, like how many of us remember the word ubiquitous, and even fewer of us remember the word syzygy. So, given that that doesn't work, and given that it has to be conversations, what we need to do is find a way to help parents have more conversations with their kids, and to prompt those conversations. And it's true in school too. I mean, you'd be stunned at the lack of conversations between teachers and students in a school environment or between kids and kids.
mm.
So how do we get more conversations? How do we languagize classrooms? And how do we languagize homes? And I will tell you one more thing is when screens, even TV, is on in the background, that is the clearest de-invitation for having any conversations.
Yeah. And I also saw a piece of research about specifically a lot of the content that you see now is just so fast paced, and
Oh,
there's
it's too
so much
fast.
moving, and
Yeah.
There was
Yeah.
this study that they did testing. They watched like 9 minutes of a fast-paced cartoon. And they tested executive function skills after, and they just plummeted for these kids who were
Hmm.
part of this media. So I mean, I think that's another factor is it's more difficult afterwards to even get into the conversation in the first place.
Exactly. I mean, you're
Um,
kind of blitzed. You're just fried. It's
yeah,
interesting when you look at some of the shows of old, and I'm not retro. I actually, believe there are lots of good uses for tech, and lots of good shows, by the way. But you look at the pace of a Fred Rogers, which is very comfortable for kids. And parents and teachers will say, well, I mean, that was like a lot of years ago. Why should we pay attention to that? And we should pay attention to it because kids may need a little bit of slow time. We
yeah,
rush them out the door, so we never get a chance to discuss the slugs that they saw on the way to school. Do you know what I mean? We
yeah,
don't stop to have those conversations. And if it would mean just getting ready a little bit earlier in the morning, right? Maybe my grandkids have this thing which I think is funny. They wear tomorrow clothes to go to bed. Then we don't have to have the conversation in the morning and nobody's yelling at anybody.
smart.
But, come up with two choices for breakfast and say, would you rather have the oatmeal or would you rather have the Cheerios? And then you can have a conversation that is slower, is focused, and, allows them to learn a bit about the world and about you and about what's going on.
Yeah, and it feels to me that these days, there's this push to never let a kid be bored almost. It's
That's
like
right. That's
where,
right.
you didn't
Yeah.
want them to you just, if they're feeling bored, okay, yeah, even if it's useful stuff, make yourself useful, like watch ABC video or something like
Right,
that.
right.
But that, you mentioned fantasy and play, and I think you have to be bored to do a lot of that stuff.
Well,
It,
yeah, to be honest with you, I just reread a lot of the work on boredom.
mm,
If you want your child to be motivated and creative, mark some downtime in your calendar. Now, if you need to call it meeting or class time just to let your friends believe you're really doing something valuable, you can do that. But downtime is where it's at. And you have to ask yourself this question, what are the skills we really want our kids to have? And it's not to shove it in so they get phonics earlier. In
mm,
fact, a whole big study in New Zealand once showed that when they did get it earlier, when they all read earlier, they didn't look any different in third grade than the American kids who had, started a little later. I think actually it was a New Zealand study, but they started later.
mm,
Let me correct myself. But but I think we are under this false idea that if we start everything earlier, it's going to somehow translate into what our kids are doing later. Like the kid who rolled over sooner is somehow going to be a better athlete. Not true. So coming back to boredom, they got to learn how to get along with other kids, including siblings.
yeah,
Sometimes when you argue with the sibling, that's a good way of learning language skills
mm,
and negotiation skills. And then they have to learn how to communicate with those they're collaborating with. And it's through that that they learn best language skills, a content of language, which then fuels reading and mathematics and takes us to critical thinking, creative innovation, and believe it or not, the patience to sit through it and try again. And we
yeah,
call those the 6 C's.
mm,
And so if you have collaboration to communication, communication to content, content to critical thinking, to creative innovation, and then to the confidence to give it a try, your
mm,
kid, which they can develop those skills in boredom, your kid is going to have better skills in a world of AI than they
mm,
would if we rush them through and try to get them there sooner.
mm. Super valuable. And I think all those, there's another C too I've been thinking about, which is
Yeah.
context. Because you just
Context. Yeah.
mentioned, yeah, like
Yeah.
being in this situation where you are having an argument with your sibling, or, there's something going on.
Hmm.
You're having a conversation, you're interacting with things around you. It's meaningful. It's so different from flashcards.
Oh my God. Oh
And
my
like,
gosh.
which who knows what they're learning with the flashcard. Maybe it's just, tied to this
Oh
one time
yeah.
that they're in a weird office with this one person and they see this one picture. Like that's all they've
And they're
picked up.
never going to remember it when they get out in the real world. And just think about, those little arguments you have with your sibs and stuff. Like, if you go in as the corrective force all the time, well, that kid will never be a good negotiator later. They're
Right.
going to say, "Where's mom?" I'm at school having an argument with a kid and I don't know how to deal. And that's a shame. And a lot of our kids don't know how to deal. They're losing a lot of the social skills that they need to be perfectly human.
Yeah, the thing you mentioned earlier really stuck out in that there are all these invisible aspects of conversation, like real world
Hmm.
conversation,
Hmm.
that, in the past, like maybe we kind of glossed over and we are like, we thought we knew what was important. We're like, put it all in this flashcard. They need to know like this letter and
Yeah,
this
yeah,
sound
yeah.
and all of this, the rest of the stuff that was actually, what was tying everything together and making it relevant and important and, engaging the kid were kind of left out. So yeah, just something I was thinking.
No, it's
Um,
really true. And I think we start a lot of this in babyhood. Like, you must do this, you must do this. Oh my gosh, there's so many rules that if I were a parent today, I think I'd go crazy.
hmm, yeah. Well, speaking of being a parent these days, I think so many parents and so many therapists as well um, are kind of struggling in, even if we do have this more nuanced idea about technology,
Hmm.
maybe
Hmm.
having some
Hmm.
positive influence and then some
Oh
aspects
yeah,
of it that are negative.
yeah.
Um, how do we make these choices? There's just so much out there. And you have this awesome paper on what makes a good
Yeah,
educational app, but
yeah.
a way of making these criteria so we can be more wise about choosing. Yeah, can you talk about what those criteria are?
Sure. Well, I mean, before I do, let me say we developed these criteria, published them in 2018, and did a study with Jenny Radetsky, who's like well known in the area of apps and learning. And by the way, there's a lot of good stuff out there, but you got to know how to find it. And when we searched the 100 most downloaded apps, how many of them made it over the bar to being really, really educationally great?
What,
Two.
yeah, crazy.
Okay, that's astounding, right? It's astounding. Okay, so what do we look for? Well, the first thing we know is that the human brain has certain characteristics about how they learn, how it learns. And it doesn't learn as well when it gets things passively as when it gets things actively. Okay, so active is part, and by that I mean mind's on, really looking at you, really there in the moment, engaged, which means not being distracted with all the bleeps and the blops, okay? Or by you looking at your phone. I say active, engaged. It should be meaningful. It should be something that the kid can dig into and actually get. Why I said tractors or cute fantasy kind of, things or dinosaurs. I mean, you'd be amazed at how much kids can learn about unicorns and dinosaurs. They would blow you away with their knowledge. In fact, want to say that when you talk about meaningfulness, to 4-year-old boys, they know more about dinosaurs than we do, like by a lot, okay, by degrees. And active, engaged, meaningful, and socially interactive, okay? When we hand the phone to a kid and say, here, do this, it's not socially interactive, even if it's a good app. And
Hmm.
remember, there weren't tons of them that came through, at least in the most downloaded apps. And then the next thing is iterative, that you present it in a lot of different ways. So we do that naturally as humans, but a lot of the app programs do not. So you might say something like, "Oh, want to sit on the couch and play a game? I love sitting on the couch. The couch is a really great piece of furniture, isn't it? Like both of us can sit here and so you see what I've done? I've used couch like 3 times. And parents do that naturally because we have a way into the different vocabulary, the kids hearing it more frequently, Zoom. And then finally, have fun. We need to play more and memorize less.
Mm.
And that's what our new book is about. Einstein never used flashcards. It actually first came out in 2003. There weren't even cell phones then. So we had to completely rewrite it for the modern time. And while babies haven't changed, as you said, the context has totally changed.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you mentioned Mr. Rogers earlier, and I was
Hmm.
thinking about the famous quote, which I think is attributed to him, which like
Hmm.
play is the work of childhood.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah. Piaget
just
said that too. I mean, Einstein recognized it. We just need to play more. And by the way, adults need to play more too.
mm,
Because if we've lost it, then we're not modeling it for our kids. When's the last time you skipped down the block?
yeah,
When's the last time you played a game? When's the last time you dumped pennies out? You know, just to talk about what year they come. That's math, okay? What year did the
I've
penny
barely
come out?
seen pennies in the
Right, I know.
last
Now we
10
won't
years.
see them anymore. So they're collection item.
Yeah, no, that's such a good point. And I remember you mentioning too that so much of it is really, we tend to blame the kids, but it's like, the kids are on their devices, but really it's the parent, that it's because
Yeah,
we're addicted to devices,
yeah,
and that's how
yeah.
we, go about the world, because there's so much imitation going on too.
Well, my 8-year-old always says, people in my life are two-legged screen watchers. So they're
That's
not
great. I'm
having
going
a
to take in that one.
conversation with him. And we go out in the world together and we look and say, "Ooh, is that a two-legged screen watcher?" She has her kid right there next to her and she's having no conversation. Or people going in the park, they're rolling their kids around the stroller and they're not talking to them at all. And my God, look at what's in a park. I mean, get out of the stroller for a moment, you'll see all these different kinds of leaves. What makes them similar? What makes them different? What do they look like? What kind of tree did they come? Oh my God, that's world knowledge. And look at
Yeah.
all the vocab you get.
Yeah. There's so much, that as we get older, I just feel like we lose touch with that, the
Hmm.
awe and wonder that is sort of that you can feel into more as a kid.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
we almost think that, oh, this is boring, it must be boring for them too. Like, this is new, the cell phone, I get
Yeah,
new videos all the time, so this is novel. So
yeah.
um but yeah,
Well, the
I
world
forget
is
that.
novel. It's when I think of like what a baby is paying attention to. Like, why don't things just fall from the sky?
Mm,
Why does the light stay up? That's weird, right? What's a corner? How come I
mm,
can't walk through walls? Like the world is fascinating and we can talk about it. If they crawl, begin to crawl, like, does this mean they're going to sink? Is it the same as it is in the tub where you
mhm.
go down instead of staying on the same plane? Whoa, how do they
Yeah,
figure this out? And are we talking about it? And of
yeah.
course, talking emotionally to say, oh, I can see you're upset, but let's try to make that better. Let's see what I can do to help you calm down. And what's making you upset when they're older? Help me help you.
Mm. Yeah. That just reminded me, like, kids are kind of figuring out the physics of the world, and it's just
Yeah,
this magical place. We were talking to Kim Aller a couple
yeah,
of weeks ago, and he was talking about just how infants, we tend to think that most of the vocalizations that they have, before one, are like they're crying, or like they want something, but
mm,
they're almost all exploratory
right.
vocalizations. They're exploring kind of the sonic space and the auditory objects that they can produce, is how he put it. So they're
Yeah,
making
that's
these
how I think of
sounds.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like an instrument. If you imagine your mouth as an instrument, which it kind of is, you
Yeah.
know, with the B's, you're in the front of the mouth. With the T's, you're touching the top and the middle of the mouth. All those are, how does this instrument play? And speech therapists do a great job of diagnosing which notes you're not playing,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, and helping you get them. But if we thought of it as an instrument, it might be more fun to get the sounds out.
I love this. Yeah, all the analogies are coming back.
Yeah, yeah.
um, yeah, I think it's so important. Um, and there is we're in this time that is difficult. It's challenging.
Oh my,
When there
yes.
is so much that is coming at us, especially now with AI, and who knows what kinds of new technologies will be coming out in the near future.
Soon, yeah.
Yeah, very soon. And I'm passionate about this because I've definitely seen, working in the schools. I saw it, all the way through, kind of 2014 to the 2021, that time in the schools. And, it's like there's this massive experiment with smartphones and
Oh
this
yeah.
wide scale adoption. And then there's all these unintended side effects, like,
Well, and then we banned it. Now in California you can't use a phone in school, right? And um
is that the case?
I
I
believe
guess I'm
that.
not
I believe
missing.
it. Check it out with,
Okay.
don't give it as law. I'm not giving it as law, but I remember hearing something about that. And my colleague Angela Duckworth just
Mhm.
did a study about how unbelievably distracting they are. I mean, they're really distracting.
Oh, yeah, I saw that firsthand. Like just very stark contrast between when I started working and then when I
Yeah,
ended working in the schools. The
yeah.
attention just plummeted.
Plummeted.
Yeah.
And why wouldn't it? What we're doing is disastrous for attention. It's an interesting thing. How many adults, let's just take adults, do we think are capable of multitasking? Supertasking, let's say. We all think we can do it.
Yeah.
The answer is
It's really small, right?
2%.
Yeah,
2%.
2%. Yeah.
2%. It was studied in the texting literature, okay, in the texting and driving literature. 2%. Now that means the chances that you are a good multitasker are exceedingly slim. The chances that your kid is a good multitasker are even slimmer. And attention is one of those things that you can think of it as like a pitcher, you know, that once it's filled with water, it just spills over and you can't hold it anymore. And that's what we're doing to kids. We can't even go into a restaurant without a screen interfering with our conversations.
Yeah. Yeah, I noticed this. I heard this other really cool piece of, well, this totally changed what I was doing and
Yeah.
made me a little scared of what I did do. But there's this piece of research on how if you reward kids for
Yeah.
something that they're intrinsically motivated by, they
Right.
actually
That's the
stop.
end.
Yeah,
Hmm.
it undermines their motivation.
Yeah.
And we're doing
Yeah.
this in apps like all the time because there's like
Oh my
these
God.
little, like, they're like,
Yes.
yeah, you did it, this celebration or the stickers. And maybe they wanted to learn the ABC.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Or give them a chance. And if it takes a little longer, let them at least put in the effort, which I think is what Carol Dweck always says of Stanford. If you want to applaud them for their effort. Not, wow, look what you did. Oh, amazing, great job.
yeah, yeah. Applaud for the effort. So important. Well, there was recently a AI positioning statement that you were part
Yes.
of, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that, as I think it is
Yeah,
important since we're,
yeah.
reaching, we're at this critical juncture here.
Oh,
Like we're
yeah.
really at this event horizon where
Oh, gosh,
we
sorry
don't
about
know.
this.
Oh, no problem.
Um, yeah, I thought I turned them all off. Now it's from all these different places. Do you see what I mean, though? This is
Yeah, yeah,
illustrative of exactly what we're talking about. That
yeah,
you can be talking, having a beautiful conversation, and this stuff comes at you, and it's like, whoa, okay, where were we? So you were asking, and notice how I have to reconstitute the conversation to make it happen,
oh
right?
yeah.
Okay,
It,
so just look at this as the perfect example to show the therapists who are in the room, the parents who are in the room. Okay, so the answer is I think the AI toy makers, they really, really, really need to talk to the scientists. We need to partner in this, not rush a toy to market. To give you a sense of how fast this is happening, this year alone, they're expecting AI toys are going to generate $34 billion in revenue. $34 billion. Okay, let's think about that. Now, What does this mean? Well, they're promising that we're going to create companions. I don't know if that means friends for kids or what it means. And when scientists looked at this, I think there were 18 of us on the banner, and now 270 scientists have now signed the petition to say, no, we cannot let this happen in the 0 to 3 crowd. But I looked a little more closely at some of the toys coming out, and let me tell you, they're pretty horrible. They
Mm.
promise companionship and easy parenting, but let's play it out. First of all, they're connecting your child to the World Wide Web. Do you want your 4 and 5-year-old connected to the World Wide Web?
Horrifying.
What guardrails are they putting in? What would parents, they say, oh, but parents have control. Oh, do you? Would you know to ask your 4 and 5-year-old, where does mommy hide the matches? And the animals, the little stuffed animals, will answer, not okay. Okay, so that's a problem. Secondly, the currency for building language is human to human interaction. We talked about the contingent human to human interaction. Now, maybe these toys can mimic some of it. They're getting better all the time. The touch, the voice, the smell, we're not there yet, but I suspect soon we will be. But here's what they do. They're very acquiescent. So if I'm talking to this toy,
Mm.
it wants you to love me. Okay. So it continues the conversation on whatever topic you want to have it have. Oh, so it just keeps going. No wonder I love it. It's like the nicest thing that anything has ever been to me. It never says no. It never says, want to talk about this? Now your child grew up with this, or is growing up with this, or it's possible. And then they go to 2-year-old school. Now, last I saw, 2-year-olds don't acquiesce much, or 3-year-olds. So you have this wonderful thing that's been having a conversation that you think is a friend, and then you're out trying to make real friends? Well, wait and see how it goes. I
Yeah.
don't think it's healthy.
Oh man. Yeah. Just like coming back to like all the same thing we did with flashcards is that
Exactly.
we thought that we knew all the parts of, what goes into language development or child development,
Mm-hmm.
and it's kind of a bit of hubris, because
Yes.
we don't actually we can't think about the negotiation between the siblings that you're just describing. There's so many dynamics that you have to learn through real interaction that you could really easily imagine a scenario where like this kid's growing up with the robot and then they don't want to they're like I want nothing to do with these other humans,
Right.
like
No,
they're
exactly right. Like,
yeah,
who are they? Skipper, I'd rather live in robot world. And by the way, a lot of people do. There
yeah.
was a convention this year, a convention where people went to introduce their AI companion to other people who had an AI companion. Like, really?
Mm,
No wonder humans are lonely. But it all boils down to what the human brain is like. It is the ultimate connector of human to human interaction. And that is the foundation for literally everything we learn, do, socialize, and for the 6 Cs.
mm, yeah. So important to talk about this, yeah, as we are going to be dealing with this more and more as
More
therapists.
and
And
more. Yeah.
yeah, so
Now,
yeah, I
does
guess
this
word of
mean,
caution.
by the way, does this mean that it won't have any good uses? I bet for neurodivergent kids, there'll be some really interesting uses for this
Mm,
in helping kids learn how to have a conversation. But I think what we can't do is one, rely on them or expect that all typical kids should go out and buy these toys to have a companion. It's not a real friend.
yeah. Yeah, I guess the other worry I have is that, yeah, it'll probably look really good on the surface, just like
Yes,
smartphones did.
yes,
Because I think to a lot of parents, it was wow, this is magic. I have to, parents are busy. They're juggling stuff.
Sure.
Might really have something to do. And they're like, maybe their
Hmm.
baby's crying. And so they're like, okay, take the phone. And it's like, wow, that was magic. That worked. And
Hmm.
it's a slippery slope because becomes if we're tired, we default to what is easier
Oh, sure
much of
we
the
do.
time. And
Agree.
yeah, and I wonder if, AI might have, or I guess it's just something that we have to be wary about as we have these toys that will be even more powerful and, more engaging.
Hmm.
Um, that we just don't completely stop being with the kids in real human interaction.
No, I think it's a real worry. And I think we run the risk because they're so sophisticated of actually tricking the human brain into thinking they're real.
Hmm.
And then it engages in these behaviors that are quintessentially not human. And we're like, oh gosh, have I derailed all of development? Like, what did I do?
Yeah.
So I would say right now, let the buyer beware. At least what I've seen in the market is not anything I'd want to invest in, even for a little bit of time.
Yeah.
And even for older kids, I was just reading an article, uh, economics article, where they talked about how I think even kids who were using Khan Academy conned the system into doing their homework for them.
Sure.
So we have to be very careful. These are powerful tools. Using them as tools is fabulous. Using them as substitutes for human interaction is not.
Yeah. I think we have to separate sometimes this is more for older students, I suppose, but we have to separate the goal of getting something done from the goal of growing. And really, we want
Yeah,
the goal to be
yeah,
growing because oftentimes, I think about like Google Maps or something. Like now I've totally offloaded all of my
yes,
cognitive, navigational,
yes,
spatial abilities
yeah,
to Google Maps. I no longer use
yes.
it. I would be lost if you threw me somewhere. It'd be terrible.
I
Um,
totally hear you. And, I think we run a risk of this with a lot of stuff. And unless you want a chip in your head, maybe that's the way we're going. But I do think there's room now, to reinstate opportunities for human to human interaction. As I think about it, if I were, you know, investing in kids who need to have more talk, who need to have more speech, can we help them as they join a theater group? You
mm,
know, can we help them engage in clubs? Maybe they're clubs to do whatever your hobby happens to be, but you meet once a week to do that. So you talk to other people who have those hobbies. In the olden days, we used to have those, whether it was building model airplanes or whether it was racing cars or whether it was collecting pennies or stamps. I think some of that needs to come back so that kids have a place. And I do have to share one I heard the other day that was just so brilliant. Um, there's a child who is in, I'm going to say seventh grade, and is not seventh grade, I'm sorry, third grade, and is really, really loud, using language to try to get attention, which a lot of kids are doing to break through the noise, right?
mm.
Just to break through the noise. And the school had the brilliant idea of having a loud talkers club. Okay, how brilliant is that?
That's
And
so
in the
cool.
loud talkers club, all the loud talkers get together and have conversations and realize the louder you are, the less likely you are to engage in the conversation. And so the kids are learning behavioral management, they're learning executive function skills, all by being in the loud talkers group,
That's genius.
right?
That's
And they
great.
come to class and they're much better behaved.
I love that. And it's hopeful because this shows that even though we are in this difficult environment, even as educators, therapists, we do have agency.
Yes.
And you could set up a situation such that, you're actually giving the child the best chance to
Yes.
engage in these, maybe you can't control
Yes.
them, but these
Yeah.
real interactions where they're going to learn the real stuff. And I love
Yeah.
that you have this project too with, the playful learning spaces, because this is setting up these situations. Yeah, maybe
Very
you can.
much so. Yeah, very much so. I mean, this idea was, again, you could go to a bus stop and people were just, everyone's looking at their phone, except the poor kid, who's sitting there, the 6-year-old, with nothing to do because the parents sitting there looking at their phone till the bus comes. So through Playful Learning Landscapes, we went and changed bus stops and we put puzzles in bus stops. We worked with community members. What would you like to see at this bus stop? And they would say, oh, this is a place where Martin Luther King first delivered the Freedom March, and we want to honor that. So we did a puzzle of Martin Luther King and 2 other puzzles. Do you know what happens now at the bus stop? Adults and kids are doing the puzzles. They put their phone down. We went into supermarkets and we just put up like little signs like, I wonder where milk comes from. Dumb, right? But all of a sudden, you say, what else comes from milk? And the kids start looking at cottage cheese. They start looking at cream cheese and sour cream and yogurt, and they have conversations about it. Or you say, wow, I wonder how much a tomato weighs. Now the kids are talking about grams and gram pound conversions in the supermarket with adults who aren't looking at their phones. So we're kind of working in supermarkets, we're working in affordable housing units, which we're spreading now across the country. We're working in
This is so
playgrounds, we're
cool.
working in museums, we're working in places people go, hospital waiting rooms, And now you're seeing parents are starting to have conversations again.
This is so cool. I just, was thinking about while you're talking, it reminds me of some of the stuff that we say in therapy, but this could be a total intervention strategy where
Right?
you do that in the homes.
Yes.
You like the parents, you can work with the parents and set up these little, they're almost like they're invitations. Because I
Mm-hmm.
think that a lot of parents actually want to interact with their kid. And then, there's just something about they feel like there's nothing to do. Like, or,
Yes.
there's nothing here.
Yes.
So I'm going to use my phone. They default to that. But if you invite, if you set up a reminder, if you have some sort of cue that's going to pull the parent in and remind them that, hey, actually, today in the morning, like when I wake up from bed, there's this thing right here. We could talk about this picture or whatever it is, just some small little cues throughout the day. Um,
Well, let me just give you a couple of them that we did during COVID, but they were so powerful. One was, I know you're going to laugh, cardboard box. Now, I was having tons of stuff, and we still do, that's being delivered right to our house all the time. What do we do with the cardboard box? That
oh man.
cardboard box can take us through hours of conversation. It can be a taxi, it can be a boat, it can be a car, it can be a rocket ship, it can be anything your heart desires. Cardboard box. Um,
I love
Another
it.
place to get a lot of language is the kitchen. Okay, so we looked at bowls. I had no idea I really had these blue, I had a blue mixing bowl, a green mixing bowl, and red mixing bowl. Okay. And I realized, oh, that's really interesting. I can now do patterns. So I let my kids play these songs and I just like did it in crayon. Red, blue, blue, yellow, red, yellow, white, blue. And my kids, and then I just put out a spatula. And my kids would go through the house and they go red, blue, blue, green. And every day I would change what was on the little crayon
Uh,
colors so they got a
it's
new
so
song.
good. Oh, it's so good. I love that. Um, yeah, the cardboard box one reminded me of my favorite comic growing up was Calvin and Hobbes.
Oh,
And
yes.
they used to play, they made it like a transmogrifier or something.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just
I mean,
so
it's
rich.
so great. Or,
Yeah.
you may not want this on your kids, but one day I was working with Sesame and they had the brilliant idea. If you take a strainer, those metal strainers,
Hmm.
and you put it upside down on a kid's head, they all of a sudden look like they went to Mars.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Colander. Yeah, those things are great.
I
Um,
mean, cool stuff.
oh man, Kathy, thank you so much for being here. It's a bummer. We're nearing the end of time. I'm going to open it up for any questions that people might have. Um, while we're waiting, yeah, maybe is there something we could look forward to? This book seems to be coming out really soon. Einstein Never
I
Used Flashcards, The
I am so
Redux.
excited about this book. I'm so excited about this book. As I said, the kids haven't changed much, but gosh, has the context. So, yeah, please look it up. Einstein Never Used Flashcards. It's you can get it now on pre-sale through Penguin
Yeah,
and
let me find the
Penguin
real
Random
link.
House, and it's coming out on January 20th. And it literally helps parents figure out exactly what they can do to play more and memorize less. And more importantly, I think parents are totally overwhelmed right now. I know I am. And I can't imagine in our daily life that is so rushed, we're missing out on the joy of parenting.
Hmm,
And we need to bring that back. And that's not to say there isn't a place for gadgets and gizmos, but there's also a place for just enjoying your kid, snuggling, and having conversations. Not with being a fuddy-dud, but Einstein Never Used Flashcards gives you the science behind why this is so important and why, even though there's some really good digital stuff out there, why I think it's time to reclaim our humanhood and to have those human to human connections with our kids.
that's beautiful. I added the link for everyone. Definitely something I'll be getting and looking at, and seems like so important for a time to just for this time where we're gonna be making a lot of decisions, and just for that wisdom to know that there are these aspects of learning that we can rely on, and make sure that we're not you know, undermining
Yeah,
with just something that's shiny and new and sparkly.
exactly,
um,
exactly. New is not always better.
right. So, as we wrap up, I'm just wondering what you're most excited about, and what do you think needs to
Mm.
be studied more?
Well, it's such a great question. I mean, there's a lot that we don't know, you know. So what I'm spending my time on now is what would it take to create more active classrooms where teachers are actually doing a little bit less circle time and a little bit more conversation time and
Mm,
dialogue and discussion. Um, how do we keep building these playful learning landscapes and get it around the whole country? What can we do to help spruce up your neighborhood so that while you're waiting, whatever it is, supermarkets, hospital waiting rooms, libraries, what can we do to create more language friendly spaces and intergenerational spaces as well? And finally, on the digital end, looking at, gee, I wonder if these things are able to trick the human brain. I think we need to know the answer to that. They're being poured onto the market before scientists actually know. So, caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. But I think that's the directions I'm headed in right now.
beautiful stuff, and definitely helpful advice for therapists too. That these real world conversations and the way that you set up the environment, that's the biggest therapy right there.
It really
Opening,
is. And
yeah,
be creative, you'll have so much fun. And boy, it'll make your job so much more fun.
yeah. I wonder if a lot of burnout comes from just putting on the apps all the time, or
Right,
just saying,
right.
oh yeah, this is the lesson, that's what it's we're going to do, versus this jazz improv that happens when you
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, we need a little more jazz in our life. So jazz it up, guys. This is your moment.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Kathy. You're an inspiration. Thank you for your work. If people want to get involved, where can they find you?
Oh my gosh. You can find me at a lot of
Let me
places.
see.
One is that we're doing some clips. This is trying to learn Instagram, but it's Dr. Kathy and Dr. Rowe on Instagram. You
Okay, I
can look
have
at
that
my web
somewhere.
page, Kathy Hirsh-Pasek, and feel happy to just join in. I
So
do post a lot of stuff I find on LinkedIn as well as on the Instagram. So wherever you are, I can be found and do join in. I want to hear what you have to say because I learn more because you guys learn more. And I think if we just have a two-way street, we're all going to have more joy in what we do.
beautiful. I just added the
Oh, thank you.
Instagram and I'm adding your website for everybody. Um, thank you so much. Any last remarks or conclusions?
Um, I guess the last remark I have is that, sometimes I look at the world today and it's so rushed and so chaotic and, it's almost designed to give us induced ADHD, and that's not fun. So I guess my biggest hope is that we can all have a little bit more fun in our life, rekindle the joy, look into kids' eyes, see the fire in their eyes, and that could be the very best elixir. Let's
Yeah.
play a little more.
You heard it, folks. Play some more this holiday season. Thanks so much, everyone, for being here. Appreciate you all. I see some familiar folks in the audience. And yeah, stay curious. Take care, everyone, and hope to see you in the next episode. Thank you, Kathy.